With over 2 million prisoners behind bars, the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. What can be done to break the cycle and reform the country's justice system? Dr. Maxine Bryant is an assistant professor in the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology at Georgia Southern University. She's an acclaimed speaker, author of 2 books, and an expert in criminal justice and corrections. Dr. Bryant, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're part of a new task force focused on helping those formerly incarcerated seek productive futures when they return to society. You say it's critically important to change that community narrative from an us and them mindset. What role can the community play with successful reintegration?
First of all, I want to thank you for using the word reintegration instead of reentry. When people reenter, they just kind of come back and there's no connectivity. When we talk about reintegration, now they're becoming a part of, they're being included with the community. There can be no community reintegration without the community, right? So what I often say is that for too long, particularly in the United States, we've operated from a paradigm of insanity when it comes to offender reentry. We expect people to spend time in jail, be reformed when they come out, and just find their place into society without any community assistance. And not possible. It's not going to happen. And then we wonder why they fail in their attempts at successful community reintegration. Well, it's because they do not have the support of the community. They need people to surround them, positive people with positive attitudes to support them, to encourage them, to hold them accountable, to hold their hands in some cases. We need employers who are willing to take a risk and hire individuals. We need landlords who are willing to rent. We need community members who are willing to include them in the community. I'm very excited that the mayor of Savannah has made room at the table, so to speak, for justice-impacted people. And that's another thing. We need to think about how we talk to them and how we refer to them. They're not ex-offenders. They're not ex-cons. They are, okay? But that's such a negative connotation. Let's change how we perceive them. They are people who've made some mistakes. They are people who have committed a crime, perhaps. They are people who have paid their debt to society. We call them justice-impacted individuals. They have been impacted by the justice system, and they need the help of the community to successfully reintegrate and be included in the community.
As you say, labels can be humanizing or they can be dehumanizing. Now, there are a lot of barriers to reintegration that we often don't think about. When is a debt to society paid, or are consequences lifelong?
We call them collateral consequences. They are lifelong. So, for example, in most states throughout the United States, people who have committed a crime, have done their time, perhaps they're off probation or parole, may not ever be able to vote, or they may have to appeal for the right to vote. People who pay taxes, who've done their time, why can they not have a vote in how they are governed? Some places, like Georgia, allow a person to vote after they've served all of their time in prison and or on probation or parole. So they're off paper, so to speak. In addition, many people who have a drug crime, for example, who've been convicted of a drug crime, are not eligible for student loans, right? Of financial aid, the Pell Grant. Not so much student loans, I'm sorry, but definitely financial aid, such as the Pell Grant. How can they get an education? How can they go back to school? There are some cities and states that refuse to allow people with criminal histories to be able to rent in Section 8 housing or subsidized housing. If I don't have a good paying job, I don't make a livable wage, where am I going to stay? So really, those situations are adding to homelessness and to a feeling of being less than. And as long as we treat them as they're less than, then we're helping them to fulfill what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy, where they become what we say they are. We have got to change the narrative. And to do that requires a change in how we perceive them and us. And like you said earlier, it can't be a them us type of dynamic. It must be we. When people with criminal histories, when justice impacted people win, we all win. Our society win. So we need to view ourselves as being on the same team.
Well, there is a loud movement to reform law enforcement across the United States, including a movement that seeks to abolish prisons and the prison system. This is very different than prison reform. What does prison abolition really mean?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I just wrote an article, submitted an article earlier this summer about penal abolition. So I kind of feel like I'm an expert on that, right? It hasn't been published yet. But so we're not talking about getting rid of prisons. We are talking about changing how we do prisons. In the United States, we use our prisons to punish people we hate. We don't like criminals. We want them to feel bad. We want them to hurt, to feel the pain that they've caused society. Other countries like Sweden and Denmark, they don't do that. They feel that being separated from society, being separated from family is punishment enough. So the focus of their prison systems is not to harm or not to hurt or even not to punish, but rather to rehabilitate, to reinstill a sense of humanness so that the society that individuals return to can benefit from added human capital. Our prison system is designed to deplete human capital, not to build it up. And so when we talk about penal abolition, what we're really saying is that we need an overhaul of how we imprison. Now, there's some people who do really bad things and they need to be put away, and sometimes for long periods of time. Now, interestingly enough, studies have shown that people who do, let's say, 5 to 10 years in prison, they serve that amount of time, added time does not make them better people when they get out. So this idea of life where you do at least 40 years or you get consecutive 10-year sentences for a total of 20, and we want to throw the book at you. The fact is that people are not usually going to be in prison for the rest of their lives unless they're sentenced to death or consecutive life sentences and things like that. But when they get out, and over 95% of them really do get out and return home, what has that experience in prison really done? Have we been successful in building up human capital? Not the way we do it. And there are some states, including Idaho, Iowa, Alaska, and Philadelphia, I think is one of them, that have actually studied prison systems in other countries to learn how we can be more humanizing in how we do prisons. But it does take an attitude change on our part.
Well, the emergence of the defund police slogan has also created confusion. Defunding the police does not mean disbanding or eliminating police departments.
Absolutely. There are some who would want to have the public believe that defunding the police equates to empty police departments where no one can answer your 911 call, where crime is going to go up and vandalism will increase and drugs and thievery and robbery and all of that is going to be on the rise. Not so. Defunding the police means reallocating funds so that one, people can survive an arrest. I call it death by arrest, and we've seen it so many times in our country. A broken tail light, selling illegal cigarettes, a $20 check dispute, right, with George Floyd. Those kind of things, the person should not end up dying, right? So what if monies were reallocated to social service agencies where a counselor is on the scene instead of law enforcement? I believe that if that had been the case with George Floyd, he would be alive. I believe that Eric Garner would be alive if a caseworker or a social worker were on the scene instead of law enforcement. Law enforcement is trained to kill, right, and to defend self and society. a broken tail light does not require that. Philando Castile died because of a broken tail light. Really? Right? And I could go on and on and on. But defunding the police really means reallocating those funds. Now, I do need to mention Camden, New Jersey had successfully really abolished their old police department that was initiated in 2013, that process. And now crime has gone down, violent crime has gone down. There's really an era of community policing where they have built trust between the community and them, and the result is a much more peaceful community. And they really did abolish and rebuild their police department. Now, that's radical. That may not happen across the United States, but it's evident that it can be done in a city that was plagued with corruption on the police force, high crime, homelessness was an all-time high, drug use and abuse was an all-time high. And they've turned that thing around by abolishing their community, their policing, and doing something different.
Encouraging that some municipalities across the U.S. are making changes in terms of reprioritizing funding and certainly igniting the conversation about the culture of crime and punishment. Dr. Bryant, thank you for sharing your expertise on NewsPoint today. You've certainly given us much to think about.
Why, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And like you said, we could go on for hours and hours, really. I could, but...